YouTube, and hello viewers, and I am back. Yes, Wazza is back with his tutorials with something completely different. Today we're going to be looking at PHP tutorials. It's something I've had in my mind that I would want to deliver, only because some of the game tutorials that I have delivered previously revolved around PHP. A lot of people have been sending me messages on things they could change on their PHP scripts for their game login systems and etc. So I decided to put a whole tutorial series together on PHP and how does it all work and how can we use PHP to not just for performance, but how can we use databases and etc. For using our PHP. So we're going to do quite a lot. There's going to be quite a few sessions in regards to this PHP. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about PHP. We're going to start off with tutorials, very simplistic ones to making systems in PHP. We're going to look at procedural PHP, and then we're going to look at object-oriented PHP. We're going to look at how do we connect to databases, how do we read information from databases, how do we make files, how do we upload files. We're going to look at so many different things in PHP. This is going to be a pretty big episode. But what we can see in today's session is just going to be a very simple introduction into PHP. What is it and why do we use it? So first things first, I've got a nice little PowerPoint presentation put together for you. It's very simple, nothing too crazy. As you can see, today is introduction day. And basically for this tutorial, I'm going to tell you a little bit about information about PHP and why we use it. Obviously, there's a few reasons why we use PHP. Obviously, one, it's server-side language. So it's a very simple language to be honest, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to look at some basic code today. So we're going to do a little bit of coding. Only a small amount just to get you used to setting up your environments and making sure that it works. And then I think at the end I'm going to obviously just shout below where you can have a look at some links down in the description where you'll be able to find some sort of reference material for you when it comes to looking at information about PHP. So what is PHP? So PHP is a hypertext pre-processing language. It is open source, so you can get it from obviously PHP's site. You can download it onto your machine. It's a little bit complicated than it just sounds, but obviously what we use is Xampp, which I showed how most of in my game videos how to set up Xampp. If you haven't done it before, I'll leave a link down in the description where you can get Xampp and you just install it, and then obviously your PHP will work that way. Or you can use a web host and that will also work. Unfortunately, because it's server-side language, it has to be done server-side. So you either have to have Xampp, or you have to have a web host, or there's Bitnami. There's tons of different things you can use. If you're using Linux, all you have to do is download Apache and PHP, and everything should be fine. Everything should work as it should do. The nice thing about PHP is that it's used to generate dynamic web pages. That will come into play further on into our videos. I'll show you what it means by dynamic web pages. It's basically we can use it to make sort of headers, bodies and footers, but we can make them dynamic and we can change them how we like with the PHP scripts. Obviously, PHP scripts reside between the reserved PHP tags. I'm going to explain exactly what that means. There are very big words in there, but obviously I will explain exactly what that means when we get to that point. However, this also allows our programmer to embed PHP scripts within HTML pages, which is really nice. And this is why I choose this language, is because every website's made out of HTML. So we can basically embed our PHP scripts within that HTML, or even JavaScript will also work with that. And you can get a very functioning dynamic website by using just PHP. The PHP language obviously is basically done through runtime, which basically means that how the PHP script works is that once the page loads, it will load that information. Obviously, it gets executed on the server. We've just explained that. So basically, everything is done on the server with the PHP scripts. The source code, what you write, is not visible by the client. So this is something that's very important. For one, for security, so you can hide some things in the background if needs be. But also, no one can see that PHP script. So I'll show you those that little bit of information once we get to that point. So as you can see just below, it says the view source and browser does not display the PHP code. So I don't know how many of you do this, but you can right click on the web page, then you can say view source, and you can see all the information within inside that website. If you decide that you want to try and steal someone's PHP code, you cannot do that because you can't see it that's outputted because obviously it's done by the server, you're not going to be able to see any of the information that's displayed. However, you can build quite a lot of different functions with PHP, and again, we'll look at that when we come to object-oriented PHP. And obviously, it's compatible with many popular databases. The ones we're going to use, obviously, MySQL databases, which are local on WAMP, or using PHP MyAdmin, and etc. So we'll look at those databases when it comes to that point. So what does PHP code look like? Well, basically, it's very similar to C or C++. I don't know how many of you code in those languages, but it's very similarly structured. There is no difference. Well, there's a little bit of difference, but not too much of a difference between the two languages. Obviously, it supports procedural and object-oriented. We are actually going to focus on procedural first, then move into object-oriented. Programming is just a little bit more easier to go down that road, instead of just throwing you into object-oriented, because you have to understand a few paradigms first before we can go straight into object-oriented. All PHP statements end with a semicolon. That is a full statement. Sometimes it doesn't have to end with a semicolon, but I'll show you some of those when we get to that point. And obviously each PHP script must end or enclosed with a reserved PHP tag, as you can see in that image below. But again, I'm going to show you how we do this, so don't panic. It's going to be very simplistic on what we use. And obviously some comments that we can do in PHP. Again, I'm going to show you this in the program, but this is just for informational sake. Obviously, it's very standard between most languages. We can use // for a single line comment, the hashtag for a shell style comment. I'll explain what that is when we get there. And obviously the /* and then the asterisk then / for a multi-line comment. And again, I will show you that once we get into writing the code, so don't really panic too much about that. We'll get into that point. So without further ado, let's get ourselves coding. Now there's a few IDEs that you can use. There's tons. You can use something as simple as Notepad, Notepad++, Netbeans. There are many different types of IDEs that you can use out there for all these different types of web languages. When I first started, I used Notepad++. Then I started to evolve, and then I decided to start using IDEs just so it keeps my workflow nice and clean. The one I use is the RJ text editor, which you can see, which I've just pulled up on the screen. Basically, this is free source. I will put it on the description below, and you can actually grab it from there. And basically, this was the very first IDE that I used, apart from Netbeans. Obviously, I use Netbeans as well, but I prefer to use this one. No, I'm not too sure why. I just feel it's a lot more cleaner. There's a lot more out there that you can have a look at. There's some you can pay for, and then there's some free ones. If you want to follow through with the tutorial using this IDE, you can. If you want to use Notepad++, it's exactly the same thing. Just when it comes to saving and stuff, it could be a little bit different. Okay. So first things first, we need to make a file. So we're going to go File, New. Now you'll see it will come as a text file. We don't really want this, so we're actually going to save this as a PHP file. So we're going to go File, Save As, and we're actually going to change this to where my Xampp folder is. So if you're actually using Xampp, obviously you need to navigate to that. So you'll find your Xampp file. Then you're going to go to htdocs, and I've already made a folder in there called YouTube. So if you go into YouTube, we're actually going to make a new file, and we're going to call this lesson1.php. And that will save that as a PHP file, as you can see there. And what's quite nice is that it's now changed its text face to PHP. Obviously, if we're using a different language, we can change to whatever language we're using in this application. But in this case, we're going to be using PHP. So first things first, let's start with our PHP. So we're going to make the crocodile mouth. We like the crocodile mouth. So we're going to open it up. We're going to put a question mark. We're going to say PHP. And to then close it off, we just put a question mark and then close the crocodile mouth. Now this is standard. You should really be doing this all the time. Some people like to work this way, where they keep it on that single line if you're only doing one line of code, which is okay. Some people like to have some line spaces. Again, that's okay. I don't mind that. One thing you shouldn't get into a habit of doing is you should never write it like this. Even though it would work, having obviously the crocodile mouth and question mark, that's still opening and closing the PHP tag, but nowadays industry doesn't really like that, so it's a good idea to make sure that you have PHP there. So obviously you know that you're opening up the PHP tag and then closing it off. Now, to make it work, very simple. As I say, this lesson is the very first lesson. We're just going to learn something very simple, nothing too advanced, just so we can see it working on our screen. So what we need to do is we're going to just echo, right? So basically echo, if we think of a dolphin, it just throws an echo out, or a submarine or something, and it wants to return something back. So in this case, we're going to put some text. Now, what we can do is we can put the quotation marks, as you can see, and we're just going to type in hello world there. Okay, and remember inside the presentation I said that everything needs to end with a semicolon. Now, by principle, if I save this, that is now saved. But how do we view this? Well, to view this, we're going to need to go into our web browser. And inside our web browser, remember, we are using something called Xampp. Okay, now I've already got it open over there. Sorry, I had to pull it over. Dual screens is a real pain. But basically, I'm running off localhost because I'm using Xampp. Okay, and I made that folder called YouTube. So basically, I've got a section for YouTube, and I've got this folder for lesson1.php. Now, if I click on that, you'll notice that it says hello world, because I've echoed out that information to say, okay, well, I'm going to echo what's in the quotation mark, i.e. hello world. Now, some nice things to take into consideration. Case sensitivity doesn't really have a place. So if we do exactly the same thing, exactly the same statement again, so we just save that. So Control S, go back to my browser. There we go, and refresh it. You'll notice that it also prints hello world. Now that's very simplistic in the case that, okay, we can say hello world and it doesn't matter if it's case sensitive. What's also important is that we could also do this. We could say echo, and you could use single quotes. So let's see what happens if we do this. So hello world. And I'll explain more of what this means by single quotes in further episodes because it's going to play a big effect later on. So let's see what happens now. So now we've got that open. If we refresh, you'll see it still prints hello world with single quotes. Okay. Now there is other options that we could also say print. And if we do that in quotes and semicolon, and we'll say this is Waz's, so we just break it up a bit. Okay, save that, and let's have a look. Refresh, and you can see that it says this is Wazza here. Now you'll see it's all on the same line because we don't have any line breaks. To make line breaks, very, very simple. Inside our little quotes here, we could just do this, and we could go BR, and that should technically give us a line break. There we go. So you can see it goes down one, and we could do the same on each one of them. Now remember, this here, this tag is an HTML tag. So it's very good to get a good understanding of HTML, especially if you're going to start doing PHP. Something very, very important to take into consideration because both of them work very well between each other. So one last thing to look at is, okay, so we've got this working now. What about those comments you're talking about? Well, remember we have the one that says /. So let's test on here. So we're going to say echo, oops, remember your line spaces, guys. So echo, doesn't have to be a space there, just a little bit more clean. So this is a single line comment. Okay, semicolon. Now if I had to view that in my browser, you can see it says this is a single line comment in that line. However, if I decide to do a single line comment, so I put the 2 /, you'll notice that it takes itself out. You can see that the color is completely changed, hence why I like IDEs, because you can see by color. And if we had to save that and refresh our page again, you'll see that's now disappeared. It's still in our code, but it's not going to display anything because there's no need to display. So let's try with the multi-line. So, oops, if I had to do that and the asterisk, oops, sorry, / and the asterisk, you can see that it's taken everything out below it, even the end of the PHP, which is not good. And if we close it off with the asterisk and forward slash, you can see that we then get this piece back. And if I copy and paste this multiple times, you can see all of this is all singled out due to that comment. So I could even type here saying this is a multi-line comment. Oops, I can't even spell today. What's going on, guys? So this is a multi-line comment. Okay, and we'll do the same for singles. So we can say this is a single line comment. Okay, so you can see that's a single line comment. If I had to put anything below it, so again, echo, you can see that it starts giving its color. So hi, how are you? And you can see now that it's got its color, because remember that's only a single line comment, so it actually has to be within that section there to make it disappear. And then the other one was this hash, which is very important because you might want to do saying this, I don't know, depends if you're in a dev environment, because you'll say, when we start looking at variables, you'll be like, well, this variable means happy days. So you'll just put a little bit of information about what variables mean by using that. Or you might want to say, I need to work on it, or there's different reasons behind using different types of commenting. That's for people in dev environments, or even for yourself to make sure that all your information is all structured. So that's pretty much getting us started. So just remember, get yourselves Xampp, get yourselves an IDE. If you don't really like using what I'm using, you're more than welcome to use Notepad++ if you feel comfortable using that, or even Notepad or Netbeans, whatever you feel comfortable with. It's entirely up to you. So that pretty much brings it for our first episode. Thank you very much for joining me. What we will be doing in our next episode will be looking at variables and how do we use those variables. And obviously we'll progress ourselves through each video once we go along. Remember, if you like this video, remember to hit the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it if you guys give me a like. And I'm glad I'm back. I'm sorry I've been missing for so long. I had to change circumstances. I went from teaching. I am now in a different job. So things changed in my life, which didn't really give me much time to make some videos. But I'm back now, and I'm going to start producing every day with one of these tutorials. I might throw one or two every day, and we'll see how it goes. Again, thank you very much.